Think about where you are right now, not just physically, but in your life. The job you have or don't have, the person you're with or not with, the city you live in, the beliefs you hold, the version of yourself you've become. Now trace it back. Not to the big decisions, those are obvious. Trace it back to the small ones. The moment you decided to stay at a party 5 minutes longer than you planned. The day you took a different route home. The afternoon you picked up a book you almost didn't pick up, or said hello to someone you almost didn't say hello to. Somewhere in that chain of small, seemingly insignificant moments is the hinge point. The moment that sent everything in a different direction. The moment that, if it had gone slightly differently, would have produced a completely different version of your life. You probably can't find it. That's the point. This is the butterfly effect, one of the most profound and unsettling ideas in all of science. The notion that in complex systems, tiny differences in initial conditions can produce enormous differences in outcome. That a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil could set in motion a chain of atmospheric events that eventually produces a tornado in Texas. That a single casual conversation, a single missed connection, a single decision made in a fraction of a second could ripple outward through time into consequences no one could have predicted. And here's the part that should really give you pause. This isn't a metaphor. It isn't a philosophical speculation. It is a mathematical reality, discovered by accident in the early 1960s by a meteorologist who just wanted to predict the weather, and who ended up discovering something about the fundamental nature of reality instead. In this video, we're going to go through all of it. We'll look at how the butterfly effect was discovered, and why the mathematics behind it shattered the Newtonian dream of a perfectly predictable universe. We'll trace it through history, through the moments where tiny details changed everything. We'll bring it into your own life and ask the questions that hit hardest. Do your choices actually matter if everything is connected? Do you actually have free will? And how do you live with the weight of knowing that every decision you make is sending ripples you'll never be able to fully see? By the end of this video, you will never look at small moments the same way again. The name comes from a 1972 talk by the mathematician and meteorologist Edward Lorenz, titled Predictability. Does the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil set off a tornado in Texas? It was a question, not a statement. Lorenz was genuinely uncertain about the answer. But the image was so vivid, so perfectly calibrated to capture the concept, that it immediately became the defining metaphor for the idea. The idea itself, though, came earlier from a discovery that Lorenz made entirely by accident in the winter of 1961. Lorenz was running weather simulations on one of the early computers of the era, using a set of mathematical equations to model atmospheric dynamics. He wanted to re-examine a particular simulation, so he re-entered the data from a previous run, but instead of entering the full precision value that the computer used internally, he rounded it slightly. Instead of 0.506127, he entered 0.506, a difference of 0.000127, less than 1 part in 4,000. He expected the simulation to reproduce the previous run closely, with perhaps minor deviations. What he got instead was a completely different weather pattern. Within a few simulated months, the two runs had diverged so dramatically that they bore no resemblance to each other. A tiny rounding error, smaller than the measurement error of any real-world instrument, had produced an entirely different outcome. Lorenz understood immediately that this was not a bug. It was a feature, a fundamental feature of certain types of mathematical systems. He had discovered what would later be called sensitive dependence on initial conditions, the property of some systems where arbitrarily small differences in starting conditions produce exponentially growing differences in behavior over time. The weather, Lorenz realized, was one of these systems, which meant that long-range weather prediction was, in principle, impossible. Not because our computers aren't powerful enough, not because we don't have enough data, but because the atmosphere is so exquisitely sensitive to tiny perturbations that even perfect knowledge of its current state, which is itself impossible, would only allow accurate prediction for a limited time before the accumulated errors from tiny unmeasured fluctuations overwhelmed the forecast. The butterfly's wing is not a poetic exaggeration. It is a literal description of the problem. In a chaotic system, a disturbance the size of a butterfly's wing stroke can, through a chain of amplifying interactions, influenced the formation of a storm on the other side of the planet. Lorenz's discovery didn't just change meteorology, it changed science. Before Lorenz, the dominant scientific worldview was essentially Newtonian, named after Isaac Newton, whose laws of motion and gravitation had dominated physics for nearly 3 centuries. In the Newtonian view, the universe is a machine. A very complicated machine, but a machine nonetheless. If you know the position and velocity of every particle at any given moment, you can in principle calculate the entire future of the universe. Determinism, the idea that the future is completely determined by the present state of things, was the default assumption of science. Lorenz's discovery cracked this worldview open, because determinism and predictability are not the same thing. A system can be completely deterministic, governed by fixed mathematical rules with no randomness, and still be completely unpredictable in practice. The Lorenz equations are deterministic. Given the same initial conditions, they always produce the same result. But because real-world measurements always have some imprecision, and because that imprecision grows exponentially in chaotic systems, the practical predictability of the system is sharply limited. The Newtonian dream of a universe that could be fully known and fully predicted was not defeated by randomness. It was defeated by sensitivity, by the discovery that the universe's rules amplify tiny uncertainties into massive divergences, making long-term prediction impossible not because the rules are unknowable, but because the initial conditions can never be measured with sufficient precision. In the years following Lorenz's discovery, mathematicians and scientists found chaos everywhere. In fluid dynamics, in population biology, in cardiac rhythms, in economics, in the behavior of electrical circuits. Chaos, the technical term for sensitive dependence on initial conditions, turned out to be not an exception to the rule of orderly systems but one of the most common behaviors in nature. The universe, it turned out, was not a clock. It was something far stranger, deterministic but unpredictable, ruled by laws but not controllable, ordered in its deep structure but wild in its surface behavior. To understand why complex systems are so resistant to prediction, we need to understand what makes a system complex in the first place. A simple system has a small number of components that interact in simple, linear ways. Push the system here and it responds there proportionally. The response is predictable because the relationship between cause and effect is straightforward. A complex system has many components interacting in nonlinear ways, ways where the effect is not proportional to the cause, where small inputs can produce large outputs, and where the components influence each other in feedback loops that amplify certain behaviors and dampen others. The atmosphere is a complex system. The economy is a complex system. An ecosystem is a complex system. The human brain is a complex system. Your social network is a complex system. In complex systems, prediction fails for a specific mathematical reason. Errors grow. If you know the initial state of a system with 99% accuracy, the 1% error doesn't stay at 1% as the system evolves. In a chaotic system, it doubles, then doubles again, then again. The error grows exponentially while your predictive window shrinks. After enough time, your 99% accurate initial knowledge produces a prediction no better than random chance. This is why weather forecasts beyond about 10 days are essentially worthless. Not because meteorologists are incompetent, but because the atmosphere is chaotic and the error growth is fundamental. It is why economic forecasters consistently fail to predict recessions. Not because they lack data, but because economies are complex systems where tiny events cascade in ways that no model can capture. It is why epidemiologists struggle to predict the exact trajectory of an outbreak. Even with extensive data, the nonlinear dynamics of disease spread make long-range forecasting extremely difficult. The world is more unpredictable than we like to believe. And the butterfly effect is the mathematical reason why. Let's make the mathematics of chaos concrete, because the abstract principle becomes much more powerful when you see it in action. Imagine you have 2 identical billiard balls. You place them on a billiard table in positions that are identical to within a millimeter, as close to the same position as you can achieve with real-world precision. You hit both balls with identical force in identical directions. What happens? For the first few bounces off the cushions, the 2 balls travel nearly identical paths. The tiny initial difference is too small to matter much. But with each bounce, the difference grows. The slight angular deviation introduced by the tiny positional difference gets amplified each time a ball hits a cushion. By the time each ball has bounced 10 or 15 times, their paths have diverged completely. They are now on opposite ends of the table, traveling in opposite directions. This is sensitive dependence on initial conditions in a simple mechanical system. And billiards is about as simple as a physical system gets: hard balls, flat table, elastic collisions. If even billiards shows chaotic behavior after a few bounces, imagine what happens in systems with thousands or millions of interacting components, each influencing all the others. Lorentz quantified this divergence mathematically and found that in chaotic systems, the separation between nearby trajectories grows exponentially with time. The rate of this growth is characterized by what are called Lyapunov exponents, numbers that describe how quickly nearby trajectories diverge. A positive Lyapunov exponent means the system is chaotic. And the larger the exponent, the faster the divergence. The atmosphere has positive Lyapunov exponents, which is why Lorentz found that his weather simulations diverged so dramatically from a tiny rounding error. The divergence is not linear and gradual. It is exponential and relentless. Cannot be fixed by better computers or better data. It is built into the mathematics of the system. Here's something beautiful and counterintuitive about chaos. It is not random. Chaotic systems are deterministic, they follow fixed rules, and even though their behavior is unpredictable in detail, it has a hidden structure that reveals itself when you look at the right level. This hidden structure is called a strange attractor. When Lorentz plotted his weather simulation data in 3 dimensions, graphing the 3 variables of his equations against each other, he expected to see a mess. Random-looking scatter with no discernible pattern. What he saw instead was something breathtaking. The trajectory of the system traced out a shape that looked like a pair of wings or an owl's eyes. 2 loops that the trajectory spiraled around without ever repeating exactly, without ever crossing itself forever. This shape, now called the Lorentz attractor, is a strange attractor. It is the geometric signature of the chaotic system's behavior. The system never goes to the same state twice. But it never wanders randomly either. It is constrained to the specific, intricate shape in mathematical space, exploring it forever, covering it densely but never repeating. Strange attractors are one of the most remarkable objects in all of mathematics. They are fractal, they have structure at every scale, with smaller copies of the overall pattern appearing within larger ones, indefinitely. They have non-integer dimension. They are too complex to be surfaces but too sparse to be volumes. They are, in a precise mathematical sense, infinitely complex objects with finite area. The discovery of strange attractors revealed that chaos is not the absence of order. It is a different kind of order, one that operates at a different level than the simple periodic order of a pendulum or a planet. The universe, it turns out, contains both kinds of order: the simple, predictable order of regular systems, and the complex, beautiful, unpredictable order of chaotic ones. And most of the interesting stuff, whether life, thought, history, lives in the chaotic kind. Newton's determinism, the idea that the universe is a clockwork machine, fully determined by its initial state, was always an idealization. It described a world of point masses and perfect measurements, of frictionless surfaces and infinite precision. It was useful, extraordinarily useful, but it was always a simplification. Chaos theory revealed one layer of why real determinism is unachievable in practice. Even in classical, non-quantum systems, the sensitivity of chaotic dynamics to initial conditions means that perfect predictability requires perfect knowledge, which is impossible. But then quantum mechanics added another layer entirely. At the quantum level, uncertainty is not just a practical limitation, it is fundamental. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle tells us that there are pairs of properties, position and momentum, energy and time, that cannot both be known simultaneously with arbitrary precision. This is not because our instruments are imprecise. It is because the universe, at its most fundamental level, does not have precise values for both members of these pairs simultaneously. The uncertainty is in nature, not in measurement. This quantum uncertainty feeds into classical chaos in a profound way. Because quantum events, the decay of a radioactive atom, the path of an electron, are genuinely random in the quantum mechanical sense, not merely practically unpredictable. And these quantum events, magnified through chaotic dynamics, can have macroscopic consequences. The decay of a single atom at a specific moment can, through a chain of physical interactions in a chaotic system, influence macroscopic outcomes in ways that are not just practically but fundamentally unpredictable. The universe is not a clock. It is not a deterministic machine. It is something more interesting and more vertiginous. A system governed by laws that produce genuinely random events at the quantum level, amplified through the nonlinear dynamics of complex systems into outcomes that are irreducibly uncertain. The future is not written anywhere. It is being written moment by the interaction of law and chance, determinism and randomness weaving together into the fabric of what happens next. History is not made only by great forces, by the inevitable clash of civilizations, by the march of economic necessity, by the slow grind of geological and demographic change. History is also made by accidents, by moments of absurd contingency where a tiny, seemingly trivial detail sent the world in a direction that no one intended and no one predicted. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914, the event that triggered World War I, almost didn't happen. The assassins had already failed once that morning. Their bomb had bounced off the Archduke's car and exploded under the next vehicle. The primary assassin, Gavrilo Princip, had given up and gone to a nearby deli. Then, by extraordinary coincidence, the Archduke's car took a wrong turn. The driver hadn't been informed of the route change after the bombing and ended up stopped directly in front of Princip. He fired 2 shots. Within weeks, Europe was at war. A wrong turn by a confused driver. That is one of the hinge points of modern history. The survival of Adolf Hitler in World War I is another. Hitler was wounded multiple times, came close to death on several occasions, and was involved in battles where most of his unit was killed. A slightly different position in a trench, a shell that landed 2 meters to the left, and one of the most catastrophic political careers in human history might never have begun. In 1928, Alexander Fleming went on vacation and accidentally left a petri dish of bacteria uncovered. When he returned, he found that a mold had contaminated the dish, and that bacteria near the mold had been killed. He investigated. The mold was penicillium. The observation led, eventually, to penicillin, the antibiotic that has saved an estimated 200 million lives. An act of forgetfulness before a vacation changed the trajectory of medicine and saved more human lives than perhaps any other single discovery. These are not metaphors. They are the documented record of how history actually works, not as the inevitable unfolding of grand forces, but as the cascade of contingencies, each one small, each one potentially going differently, together producing outcomes that feel inevitable only in retrospect. Of all the historical counterfactuals, the what-if questions that historians and philosophers argue about, none is more discussed than this one. What if Adolf Hitler had been accepted to the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts? Hitler applied to the Academy in 1907 and 1908. He was rejected both times. The rejection was devastating to him personally. He had genuinely wanted to be an artist, and the Academy's assessment that he lacked talent crushed a dream. In the aftermath of the rejection, he drifted, living in poverty in Vienna, developing the political obsessions and racial hatreds that would eventually define his public career. Would acceptance have changed things? It's impossible to know. History doesn't run controlled experiments. But the question is worth sitting with because it illustrates something important about the butterfly effect in human affairs. The factors that determine whether a person becomes who they become are not all grand and inevitable. They include chance encounters, institutional decisions, small failures, and small successes that redirect attention and energy. The acceptance committee at the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts, who almost certainly had no idea what they were deciding, made a decision that sent a frustrated young man down a path of political radicalization. This is not to say that the Holocaust was caused by an art school rejection. The causes of the Holocaust were deep, structural, and involved the choices of millions of people. But the timing, the specific form, the political vehicle, these depended on the specific trajectory of one specific individual, which depended on decisions and accidents that could easily have gone differently. History is not inevitable. It is a chaotic system, sensitive to initial conditions, capable of bifurcating on the smallest of hinges. Beyond the famous counterfactuals, history is full of moments where a decision made in seconds, or an accident that happened in an instant, altered the trajectory of civilization. On October 27, 1962, At the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis, a Soviet submarine called B-59 was depth-charged by American naval forces. The submarine had been out of radio contact, and its crew didn't know whether war had already begun. The submarine's captain, Valentin Savitsky, believed it had. He ordered a nuclear torpedo armed and prepared for launch. Soviet protocol required the agreement of 3 officers to launch. The captain and the political officer agreed. The third officer, Vasily Arkhipov, refused. He argued for surfacing and making contact before any irreversible action. After a tense confrontation, Savitsky stood down. One man's refusal to authorize a nuclear torpedo launch, in the most stress-filled moment of his life, at a point in history when the world had never been closer to nuclear war. One decision, in a submarine in the dark, by a man whose name most people don't know. Historians have since called Arkhipov the man who saved the world. They are probably not exaggerating. Or consider the moment in 1983 when Soviet early warning systems reported an incoming American nuclear missile strike. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov was on duty. Protocol required him to report the warning up the chain of command, which would have triggered a Soviet response. Petrov decided, based on gut instinct, that it was a false alarm. A satellite had misidentified sunlight reflecting off clouds as missile launches. These are the hinge points of history, ordinary people in ordinary moments making decisions in seconds, and the weight of those seconds measured in millions of lives. Let's bring this closer. Not to world history, to yours. Think about how you met the most important person in your life. Not the relationship itself, the meeting. The specific moment, the specific circumstances that brought you into the same place at the same time. How many things had to align for that to happen? How many small decisions, yours and theirs, led to that specific moment? You went to a particular party because a friend insisted. Or because you almost didn't go and then changed your mind. Or because your original plans fell through and you needed something to do. They were there because of their own chain of small contingencies. And the moment of meeting, the conversation that started, the connection that formed, depended on being in the right place at the right time, which depended on a cascade of decisions that neither of you controlled or planned. This is the butterfly effect in personal biography. Your life is the product not just of your choices, but of the conditions that shaped those choices, which were themselves the product of prior choices and prior conditions, stretching back before you were born. The college you attended or didn't, the city you ended up in, the career you fell into or chose or stumbled upon. Each of these is a node in a network of contingencies. Pull any one of the threads and the whole network changes. The person you are right now, the specific configuration of experiences, relationships, beliefs, and habits that constitutes you, is the product of a path through possibility space that was never inevitable and could easily have been otherwise. That's not a reason for anxiety. It's a reason for wonder. Every moment of your life that feels ordinary, every cup of coffee, every chance encounter, every small decision, is a potential hinge point. You won't know which ones mattered until much later, if ever. But some of them will. Research on social networks, on how relationships form and how they influence our lives, consistently finds something counterintuitive. The relationships that most change our lives are often not our closest ones. They are what sociologist Mark Granovetter famously called weak ties, acquaintances, casual contacts, people on the periphery of our social world. This is because our close relationships tend to inhabit the same social world we do. They know the same people, have access to the same information, move in the same circles. They are deeply connected to us, but they don't expand our reach into new territory. Weak ties do. The acquaintance you met once at a conference who mentioned a job opening. The person you sat next to on a flight who suggested a book that changed how you think. The friend of a friend you met at a gathering who introduced you to someone who became central to your life. These peripheral connections, the ones that feel random and unimportant at the time, are often the ones that create the most significant changes in trajectory. The butterfly effect in social life operates precisely through these weak ties. A casual encounter, someone you might easily have never met in a situation that could easily not have occurred, sends a ripple through your network that eventually becomes something significant. You cannot trace it back easily, because the chain is long and the individual links seem inconsequential. But the chain is there. Think about the people who changed your life the most. How many of them did you meet by design and how many by accident? How many of those accidents were the product of small, seemingly arbitrary decisions, to go to a particular place, to stay a little longer, to strike up a conversation you almost didn't have? The accidents weren't random. They were the butterfly effect at work in the chaotic system of your social world. Here is the version of this that hits hardest. There was a moment, probably several moments, where your life could have gone in a radically different direction. Not because of a grand choice between clearly defined options. Because of something small. Something you might not even remember. You almost took a different job. You almost moved to a different city. You almost said something you didn't say, or didn't say something you did. You almost ended a relationship that you stayed in, or stayed in one that you ended. The differences between the life you lived and the life you almost lived are not always big dramatic decisions. Sometimes they're tiny ones. Sometimes they're accidents. Sometimes they're the absence of a decision, the choice to do nothing, which was itself a choice. In the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, every quantum event that could have gone differently did go differently, in another branch of reality. Which means, taken literally, that there are versions of you living the lives that your near misses almost produced. The version of you that took the other job, that moved to the other city, that said the thing you didn't say. You can't contact those versions. You can't know what their lives look like. But the butterfly effect tells you that those lives are not just slightly different from yours. Because of the chaotic amplification of small differences over time, those lives are radically, unpredictably different. Different relationships, different careers, different beliefs, different selves. The you that took the other path is not a slightly modified version of you. They are someone quite different, shaped by decades of different experiences. That's either terrifying or liberating, depending on how you look at it. Probably both. The butterfly effect raises a philosophical question that cuts to the heart of how we understand ourselves. If everything is connected, if tiny initial conditions determine vast outcomes through chains of causation we can neither see nor control, do our choices actually matter? This is the free will problem in its most visceral form. Not the abstract philosophical puzzle about determinism and moral responsibility, but the lived question of whether it makes any difference what you do. If a butterfly's wing in Brazil can set off a tornado in Texas, then presumably your decision to have coffee instead of tea this morning is also sending ripples through the causal fabric of the world. But you didn't choose that decision freely, you chose it because of your prior states, which were determined by prior causes which stretch back to before you were born. In a fully deterministic universe, or even in a chaotically unpredictable but still causally closed universe, there seems to be no room for genuine free will. Everything that happens, happens because of what came before it. You are not the author of your choices. You are the vehicle through which prior causes produce subsequent effects. This conclusion has been reached by philosophers for centuries. It is called hard determinism, and it is logically coherent. But it is also deeply counterintuitive because the experience of choosing feels irreducibly real. You genuinely feel like you are deliberating, weighing options, selecting among possibilities. The feeling of agency, of being the cause of your own actions, is one of the most fundamental features of conscious experience. The butterfly effect doesn't resolve this tension. If anything, it sharpens it. Because on one hand, it shows that your choices have consequences, enormous, cascading, unpredictable consequences. On the other hand, it shows that those choices themselves were determined by prior conditions that you didn't choose. Your choices matter enormously, and you may not have genuinely chosen them. The neuroscience of decision-making has added a new and deeply unsettling dimension to the free will debate. Because it turns out that the feeling of making a decision, the conscious experience of deliberating and choosing, may come after the decision has already been made by your brain. The key experiment was conducted by neuroscientist Benjamin Libet in the 1980s. Libet asked participants to flex their wrist whenever they felt like it, while monitoring their brain activity with EEG. He also asked them to note the position of a clock hand at the moment they first became aware of the intention to move. The results were startling. The brain showed a distinctive pattern of electrical activity, called the readiness potential, that began about 550 milliseconds before the movement. But participants reported becoming aware of their intention to move only about 200 milliseconds before the movement. The brain had already begun preparing the movement more than a third of a second before the person was consciously aware of intending it. The implication that many drew from this, and that Libet himself cautiously suggested, is that the conscious experience of deciding is not the cause of the decision. It is a consequence of neural processes that have already begun, a post hoc awareness of something the brain has already initiated. The decision happens first. The experience of deciding comes after. If this interpretation is correct, then free will, as we ordinarily conceive it as the conscious deliberation that causes our actions, is an illusion. Not a complete illusion. Libet noted that people could consciously veto the movement up until the last 150 milliseconds before it occurred, suggesting some role for conscious awareness in modulating behavior. But the initiating cause of action in this model is not the conscious self. It is neural processes that precede and produce the conscious self's experience of deciding. This doesn't mean your choices don't matter. It means that you, in the sense of your conscious experience, may not be who is making them. The apparent incompatibility between free will and determinism, or between free will and the neuroscience of decision-making, has led many philosophers to a position called compatibilism, the view that free will and determinism are not actually in conflict properly understood. The compatibilist argument goes roughly like this. What we care about when we care about free will is not some magical ability to escape causation, to make choices that have no causes. What we care about is the ability to act according to our own desires, values, and reasoning, without being coerced by external forces. A person who chooses to help someone because they genuinely want to help them is acting freely, in the relevant sense, even if that desire was itself caused by prior experiences and neural states. A person who is forced at gunpoint to hand over their wallet is not acting freely, not because their action was caused, but because the external coercion overrides their own desires and values. In this view, freedom is about the source and nature of the causes of your action, not about whether your action has causes. Actions caused by your own values, your own reasoning, your own character, these are free. Actions caused by external compulsion, or by internal states that bypass your rational deliberation, these are not. The butterfly effect in the compatibilist framework doesn't threaten free will at all. Yes, your choices are caused by prior states, but those prior states include your character, your values, your accumulated wisdom, the things that make you who you are. When you make a choice that reflects those things, you are acting freely in the only sense that matters. The causal chain that led to your choice runs through you, through the specific person you are, and that's what makes it yours. Compatibilism doesn't resolve every philosophical worry about free will, but it does something important. It shows that the butterfly effect's revelation of deep causal interconnection doesn't automatically undermine the significance of human agency. Even in a world of cascading causes and sensitive dependence, your choices can still be genuinely yours. The connection between quantum mechanics and the butterfly effect is one of the most fascinating and least discussed aspects of both subjects. Because quantum uncertainty, the irreducible randomness built into the fabric of reality at the subatomic level, is not just a feature of the very small. Through the amplifying dynamics of chaotic systems, it reaches all the way up to the macroscopic world. Here's how the connection works. Quantum events, the radioactive decay of an atom, the path of a photon, the tunneling of an electron through a barrier are genuinely random. Not just unpredictable in practice, but irreducibly probabilistic in principle. There is no hidden variable, no underlying deterministic mechanism that determines which specific outcome occurs. The universe at the quantum level rolls dice. Now consider a chaotic system, say the weather. The atmosphere is a macroscopic system, governed by classical physics at the scale where we experience it. But it is chaotically sensitive to initial conditions. A tiny difference in, say, the position of a water molecule in the upper atmosphere can cascade, through the amplifying dynamics of air circulation, into a significant difference in weather patterns days later. And the position of that water molecule is ultimately determined by quantum events. The molecule's thermal motion, the random jiggling that determines its precise position at any given moment, is rooted in quantum mechanics. The quantum randomness percolates upward through the hierarchy of physical scales, gets amplified by chaotic dynamics, and emerges at the macroscopic level as weather or market fluctuations, or the specific pattern of a person's thoughts at a given moment, or the winner of a coin flip. The universe is genuinely random at the bottom and chaotically sensitive at the top. The combination means that the future is not just unpredictable in practice. It is genuinely open, not written, still being created moment by moment by the interaction of physical law and quantum chance. Quantum mechanics introduced one of the most philosophically troubling ideas in the history of science: the role of the observer in determining physical outcomes. We touched on this in our simulation theory video, but it deserves another look here, because it connects directly to the question of whether observation and attention can change what happens. In the double-slit experiment, an electron fired at a barrier with two slits produces an interference pattern on a detector screen, behaving like a wave passing through both slits simultaneously. But when you set up a detector to observe which slit the electron actually goes through, the interference pattern disappears. The electron now behaves like a particle going through one slit or the other. The act of observation changes the outcome. This is not a quirk of the specific experiment. It is a fundamental feature of quantum mechanics. The act of measurement of interaction that yields information causes quantum systems to settle into definite states from their prior superposition of possibilities. Before measurement, the electron is in some sense in both places at once. After measurement, it is definitely in one place. The connection to the butterfly effect: if observation changes outcomes at the quantum level, and if quantum events cascade through chaotic dynamics into macroscopic consequences, then in a very real sense what you pay attention to might matter. Not in a mystical sense, not because your consciousness directly influences reality through some non-physical mechanism, but because attention directs action, and action affects initial conditions, and initial conditions in chaotic systems determine large-scale outcomes. Where you look shapes what you do. What you do changes initial conditions. Changed initial conditions cascade through chaotic dynamics into changed futures. The observer is not passive. And in a chaotic world, the difference between observing and not observing can be larger than anyone expected. We've visited the many worlds interpretation before, but it has a particularly poignant application to the butterfly effect. Because if every quantum event causes a branching, if every possible outcome of every quantum measurement actually occurs in some branch of reality, then the decisions you didn't make are not lost. They exist. In branches of reality that diverged from yours at the quantum level, someone very like you made the other choice. This is not a comforting thought exactly. It's more complex than that. On one hand, it means that the road not taken is real. The version of you that took the other job, moved to the other city, said the thing you didn't say, that version exists in a branch that diverged from yours at some quantum event that tipped the balance of a neural decision in a slightly different direction. The life you almost lived is being lived, somewhere in the branching structure of reality. On the other hand, it means that you cannot be consoled by it. You are here in this branch. The experiences of the other branches are not accessible to you. The fact that another version of you is living another life doesn't make your choices here less consequential, because those choices still determine which branch of the future you inhabit. And the butterfly effect tells you what the many worlds interpretation confirms. The branches diverge rapidly. A small difference in initial conditions, a quantum event that tips a neural decision slightly differently, produces, through the amplifying dynamics of chaotic systems, a radically different life trajectory over time. The version of you that made a slightly different choice 10 years ago is not living a slightly different version of your life. They are living something quite unrecognizable, shaped by a decade of different experiences, relationships, and consequences. Every choice you make is a branch point, and the branches don't converge. Despite the inherent unpredictability of chaotic systems, chaos theory has proven enormously useful, not for eliminating unpredictability, but for understanding its structure and limits, and for developing strategies that work within those limits rather than against them. Weather forecasting is the obvious example. Lorenz's discovery didn't end weather prediction. It transformed it. By understanding the mathematical structure of atmospheric chaos, meteorologists have developed ensemble forecasting methods that run many simulations with slightly varied initial conditions to map out the range of possible outcomes rather than committing to a single prediction. The result: modern weather forecasts are dramatically more accurate than pre-Lorenz ones. Even though the fundamental unpredictability remains, we've learned to work with chaos rather than pretend it doesn't exist. Financial markets are another domain where chaos theory has found application, and where its lessons have been learned the hard way. Markets are complex, nonlinear, sensitive systems where small events can cascade into large price movements, where feedback loops amplify trends and then reverse them violently, where models that assume linear relationships repeatedly fail during crises. The 2008 financial crisis was, in part, a butterfly effect. The failure of a relatively small segment of the mortgage market cascaded through interconnected financial systems in ways that no one had modeled, because the models assumed away the nonlinear dynamics that turned a manageable problem into a global catastrophe. Epidemiology is a third domain. The spread of infectious disease is a chaotic process, sensitive to the specific network structure of social contacts, to the timing of interventions, to individual behavior that is itself chaotically influenced by information flows. COVID-19 demonstrated this vividly. Early interventions that seemed small, closing schools a week earlier, implementing mask mandates before rather than during surges, had consequences orders of magnitude larger than their immediate visible effects, because they changed the initial conditions of an exponentially growing chaotic process. Chaos theory teaches us that in these systems, the timing and targeting of interventions matter enormously, because small changes in initial conditions produce large downstream effects. It is not a counsel of despair. It is a call for precision, for early action, for sensitivity to the nonlinear dynamics that make small differences large. There is a dream, persistent, seductive, and increasingly powered by artificial intelligence and big data of prediction, of a world where enough data, processed by powerful enough algorithms, can tell us what will happen next. In markets, in weather, in human behavior, in politics, the dream of a perfectly informed future. The butterfly effect tells us this dream is impossible. Not because we don't have enough data or powerful enough computers, but because the systems we want to predict are chaotically sensitive to initial conditions that we can never measure with sufficient precision. No matter how much data we collect, there will always be unmeasured fluctuations at the margins. And in chaotic systems, those unmeasured fluctuations grow, through exponential amplification, into the dominant signal within the predictive window. This is not a temporary limitation. It is permanent. It is built into the mathematics of nonlinear dynamics and into the quantum indeterminacy of the physical world. We can improve our predictions within the predictive window, and chaos theory tells us how to do that through ensemble methods and sensitivity analysis. But we cannot extend the window indefinitely. The horizon of reliable prediction is inherent to the system, not to our ignorance. The implications are significant. In finance, it means that anyone claiming to predict markets reliably over long time horizons is wrong. Not probably wrong, but provably wrong by the mathematics of chaotic systems. In politics, it means that confident long-range predictions of political outcomes should be treated with skepticism. In personal life, it means that the plans you make for your future are valuable as intentions and as frameworks, but not as reliable forecasts. The future will surprise you, not because you plan badly, but because reality is chaotic and your plan, however good, cannot account for the butterfly wings it didn't know about. Artificial intelligence and big data represent the most powerful prediction tools humanity has ever built. Machine learning algorithms trained on vast datasets can make predictions that consistently outperform human judgment in many domains: medical diagnosis, image recognition, language translation, game playing. The capabilities are real and impressive, but they run headlong into the butterfly effect in any domain that involves complex, chaotic dynamics. A machine learning model is trained on historical data. It learns patterns, correlations between inputs and outputs that were present in the training data. But chaotic systems are precisely those where past patterns don't reliably predict future behavior, because tiny differences in initial conditions produce large differences in outcomes. The model learns what happened under specific historical conditions. It cannot learn what will happen under conditions that differ from those, even slightly, in chaotically sensitive ways. This is why AI-based financial prediction consistently fails in crisis conditions. The crisis conditions differ from training conditions in precisely the chaotically sensitive ways that produce large divergences. The model has learned the patterns of normal markets. Crisis markets are different enough in their nonlinear dynamics, their feedback loops, their sensitivity to sentiment, that the patterns don't transfer. The same applies to AI-based weather forecasting, epidemiological modeling, and political prediction. In each case, the technology improves on naive approaches and human intuition within certain ranges. In each case, it runs into the fundamental wall of chaotic unpredictability at longer time horizons and in novel conditions. Big data doesn't solve the butterfly effect. It extends the predictive window and improves accuracy within that window, which is enormously valuable. But it cannot eliminate the horizon. The butterfly's wing is always out there, unmeasured, sending its ripple through the system. And no amount of data or computing power will bring it fully into view. If every decision sends ripples you can't predict, if every small moment is a potential hinge point, if the butterfly wing of your casual choices might cascade into consequences you'll never be able to fully see, how do you live with that? There's a version of this realization that leads to paralysis. If everything matters and I can't predict how, then every decision becomes a potential catastrophe. Every choice carries impossible weight. The coffee I order, the route I take, the message I send or don't send. Any of them could be the butterfly wing that sends everything in a direction I'll regret. This is anxiety as a philosophical position, and it is as unhelpful as it is understandable. The better response, the one that the butterfly effect actually supports if you think about it carefully, is something like the opposite of paralysis. Because the unpredictability goes both ways. Yes, a small decision could lead to a bad outcome, but it could also lead to an unexpectedly good one. The chaos cuts both ways. The butterfly wing can send the storm in any direction. And here's the thing you cannot not decide. Inaction is a decision. Avoiding a choice is a choice. The person who stays home to avoid the risk of a bad encounter also avoids the chance of a life-changing good one. In a chaotic world, there is no safe ground. There is only the decision you make, and the ripples you set in motion, and the life that emerges from the cascade. The butterfly effect is not a counsel of caution. It is a counsel of engagement. Do things. Make choices. Show up. Not because you can predict the outcomes, you can't. But because your choices, however small, are the initial conditions of your future. And in a chaotic system, those conditions matter. The butterfly effect presents a challenge to meaning-making. Because meaning, as we ordinarily conceive it, requires some sense of purpose, direction, or narrative. The sense that things happen for a reason, that the story of your life has a shape that makes sense, that your choices lead somewhere. Chaos doesn't obviously support this. In a chaotic universe, there is no guarantee that your choices lead anywhere in particular. The cascade of consequences is real but unpredictable. The life that emerges from your choices is genuinely yours, shaped by what you did and didn't do. But its specific form was never determined in advance and cannot be retroactively traced to a plan or a purpose. And yet, meaning is not something found in the structure of the universe. It is something created by conscious beings who care about things, who love people, who have projects and values and commitments. The meaning in your life is not written into the physics. It is written by you, into the experiences and relationships and choices that constitute your days. The butterfly effect doesn't undermine this. If anything, it deepens it, because it tells you that your choices, however small they seem, are real. They have consequences. Those consequences cascade through the lives of people around you, through the systems you participate in, through the future you're helping to create. You are not a passive observer of a predetermined script. You are an active participant in the chaotic, unpredictable, wildly contingent process of a universe working itself out. That's not a small thing. That's the biggest thing there is. Here's the final turn. The one that takes the butterfly effect from something potentially terrifying to something genuinely beautiful. A fully predictable universe would be a dead one. Not dead in the literal sense, it might contain matter and energy and stars, but dead in the sense that nothing new would ever happen. Everything would be determined from the beginning, unfolding mechanically toward an already fixed end. There would be no surprises, no emergence, no creativity, no evolution. Chaos is what makes the universe alive. It is the mechanism by which complexity emerges from simplicity, by which the specific, rich, detailed world of organisms and minds and cultures arises from the undifferentiated matter of the early universe, by which life evolves, because evolution is a chaotic process, sensitive to the initial conditions of genetic variation and environmental contingency, capable of producing outcomes no one could have predicted from the initial conditions. Your existence is a product of chaos. Not just the evolutionary chaos that produced Homo sapiens, but the specific contingent chaos of your particular life. The specific combination of genetics and environment and experience and choice that produced you, this version of you reading this right now, is the outcome of a cascade of chaotic processes so intricate and so sensitive that it could never have been predicted and will never be reproduced. You are, in the most literal sense, a butterfly effect. A cascade of contingencies, amplified through time, producing something unique and unrepeatable. The butterfly effect didn't just shape your life. It made you possible. Every small moment, every casual encounter, every decision that seemed inconsequential, all of it contributed to the specific configuration of causes that produced you. And all of it is continuing right now to shape what you will become. That's not a burden. That's a gift. Every moment matters. Even this one, especially this one.